Hello and welcome to Doodle Bliss with Jane Midday. Today I'm going to talk to you about watercolor markers. Now if you've been in my studio, you know that I love art supplies. I love trying new ones. I love experimenting with them. And right now I'm really into using markers. I have 3 brands to show you today. I've got Faber-Castell Albrecht Dürer. I have Ecoline brush pens. And I have the Zig Clean Color Real Brush pens. Now there's a little bit of a difference. The Ecoline and the Faber-Castell have these large solid brush nibs. So these are good for coloring larger areas. You can see the Ecoline has a slightly finer point. And you can use them for lettering. I think the Ecoline is a bit better for lettering than the Faber-Castell. The Faber-Castell is the juiciest of all the markers, and so it is good for coloring really large areas or if you want to use a lot of brush work with them. Now the Zig Clean Color is a little bit different. I don't know if you can see that. See how the brush separates? This is made of real bristles. It's got real separate bristles instead of the solid felt tip that the other markers have. It's good for detail work, for doing smaller, more delicate lettering, but it is not as good for coloring a large area. Now I'll show you a little bit of how you can work with them. Here's my Faber-Castell marker. I'm going to color a little bit with it. And I've got a wet brush here. And look, you can blend that out with the clean water just like regular watercolor. I should note I'm using hot press watercolor paper here. You don't want to use a rough paper because that will damage the nibs of your markers. And some cardstocks are really absorbent, and so you'll color on it with the marker and it'll soak in so fast that you can't really blend it with the water as well. Another method you can use is to color with the marker on a palette. What I have here is a Tim Holtz glass craft mat that I like to use, and it comes with this white glass area that you can use as a palette. So I pick up the paint off the palette like that, and see, I can use it like a regular watercolor. Now another thing you can do with these is blending from color to color. So what I'm going to do, I've got red and yellow here. I'll color a little bit with the red, color a little bit with the yellow, and look, you can blend it out, blend it in with the red one, and make a clean blend like that, from orange out to yellow. So that shows you some techniques that you can do. You can go back in, add some more yellow, extend it out. You can see how far that color will blend. I mean, that's a really juicy marker right there. So that shows you a few techniques that you can use with these. Another thing that you can do is lifting a highlight out. So you could color with a dark color like that, and then go back in, and look, you can lift out a highlight. You can blot that if you want to stop it spreading. So that's a good way to add highlights and shading. So I've got here a drawing of a flower that I did, and I'll show you how to use some of the techniques that we've started already. So I've got yellow. Here we go. Make sure they're dual tipped, so they come with a bullet tip as well. So I'm just making sure that I have the brush tip out. So I'm going to color with some yellow and then with some orange like that. And we're going to blend those two together like that. See how nice that looks? Another way you could do it is to color the entire petal with the yellow and then go on top of that with the orange and blend it out that way. Or the third technique, let's add some more color to my glass palette here. Once you're done, all you do is mop up the palette with a wet cloth, and that cleans right off. So I've got those. Pick up the yellow and paint that on there. And pick up the orange and paint that on there and blend it with a little clean water. Doing it this way, it's going to be a little bit lighter and more delicate, but sometimes that can give you a more traditional watercolor look. So I'm going to go through, color my petals. You don't want to rub too much on the paper, or else the paper can pill up a little bit and get rough. And you want to work kind of quickly so that the marker doesn't dry too much. If it dries too much, you'll have a hard time blending it out. So there's my blends, like that. Blend that out nice with the water. Okay, now what we're going to do is put the caps on the markers. You can just hear I just dropped the cap to that one. I'll get that in a minute. Now let's color in the center, the flower center. Like that. And here we'll do the lifting technique for some highlights there. Like that. I might even want to go back in over the top, see if I can make that a little bit darker for some shading. There we go. Now I like to use the Zig Clean color markers for more detailed areas, like the stem. That is pretty thin. And I'll show you, you can still use these the same way with coloring a little section and then blending it out with the water like that. But they're not quite as good for doing that as the markers that have the bigger, more solid tip that give you a lot juicier of an application on the paper. So let's dry this off a little bit. And the other thing I like to do is you can go back in with your Zig Clean color markers. And here I'm going to add just some details onto the flower petals, like that. So I like to have both kinds of markers at my disposal, depending on what I want to do. But you could also, you can get a certain amount of a fine line with the brush tip here. I'll show you. See, you can still do it if you've just got one type of marker, but it is harder to get a delicate line with these bigger tips. But you can see you can still do it. And if you want to, you can go back in and do a little bit of blending on those lines. That's up to you if you want them blended out for a more washy look, or if you want them to be more defined like that. I think I'll lift a little of the color there. That's a little bit dark. So we lift that, blot it, and that lifts a bit of the color up. So there you have it. There is my flower done with watercolor brush pens. I'm going to add a little bit more detail to the top. And I hope you enjoyed that and give those techniques a try. Thanks a lot, and see you next time on Doodle Bliss.